Leftist political analyst Peter Beinart is deeply disturbed that National Security Advisor John Bolton has chosen Fred Fleitz as his chief of staff. Writing in The Atlantic, Beinart noted that Fleitz has for the last 5 years served as senior vice president at the Center for Security Policy, an organization that, according to Beinart, for more than a decade has been arguing that American Muslims who observe Sharia, or Islamic law, don't deserve the protections of the First Amendment. Now, this sounds terrible if one doesn't know anything about Sharia, and Peter Beinart obviously doesn't. In a 2016 piece condescendingly entitled "How Not to Speak About Islam," Beinart scolds Rabbi Ari Berman, president of Yeshiva University, for some of his statements about Islam, and concludes, "University presidents should not lecture on subjects they know little about." Beinart should take his own advice. His claims about Fred Fleitz and the Center for Security Policy are classic examples of the straw man fallacy. Beinart's scenario is that the CSP and Fleitz, overflowing with bigotry, were calling for law-abiding citizens who happen to follow a particular religious law to be stripped of First Amendment protection. In a 2017 article hitting the CSP and its president, Frank Gaffney, Beinart makes this plain by likening opposition to Sharia to anti-Jewish and anti-Catholic prejudice in American history. He says, Gaffney and his allies view Sharia not as a religious code, but as a totalitarian ideology cloaked in religious garb. Muslims who adhere to it, therefore, should be treated not like Jews who adhere to halakha, the body of Jewish law, or Catholics who adhere to canon law, but like Americans who espoused communism, fascism, National Socialism, or Japanese imperialism during times of war. They should be treated, in other words, like people seeking to overthrow the United States government. That's what Beinart says, and he also claims that Gaffney's theory resembles conspiracy theories about vulnerable minority groups in the past. Yet in several articles that he has written attacking the CSP, Gaffney, Fleitz, and other opponents of Sharia, Beinart never actually gets around to explaining in any detail what Sharia really is, or to refuting even one of the CSP's assertions about it. He just presents them, as leftist writers so often do in so many contexts, as if they were self-evidently false. Were he to decide to educate himself about the actual contents of this law that he defends so ardently, a good place to start would be a book called Reliance of the Traveler, a manual of Sharia that Al-Azhar, the Cairo institution that is the most prestigious and influential authority in Sunni Islam, certifies as conforming to the practice and faith of the Orthodox Sunni community. Reliance is also certified as a reliable guide to what Sharia is by Taha Jabir Al-Awani, president of both the International Institute of Islamic Thought and the Fiqh Council of North America, and Nuh as-Salman, the Mufti of the Jordanian Armed Forces. Does this venerable Sharia manual bear out the CSP's contention that Sharia is a totalitarian ideology? Well, look, like a totalitarian ideology, it forbids criticism of itself, mandating death for someone who mentions something impermissible about Allah, the Prophet, or Islam. Also, like a totalitarian ideology, it calls for the murder of those who dare to leave the fold. When a person who has reached puberty and is sane voluntarily apostatizes from Islam, he deserves to be killed. With Sharia denying the freedom of speech and the freedom of conscience, a fully Sharia-adherent Muslim may find himself in violation of numerous American laws. And there's more. Sharia denies the equality of rights of women and even restricts their freedom of movement. Once again, a quote from Reliance of the Traveler. The husband may forbid his wife to leave the home because of the hadith related by Haki that the Prophet said it is not permissible for a woman who believes in Allah and the last day to allow someone into her husband's house if he is opposed, or to go out if he is averse. If a woman disobeys her husband, in the words of this same Sharia manual, her husband may hit her. Would Beinart consider prosecution under domestic violence laws of a Muslim husband in the U.S. who beat his wife to be bigoted or Islamophobic? He derides Fred Fleitz for being one of 16 authors of a 2015 CSP report that recommended that the U.S. government revoke the citizenship of naturalized Americans who, in seeking to insinuate Sharia-compliant norms into civil society, have violated their oath of naturalization and allegiance to defend the Constitution of the United States. But does Beinart really favor the acceptance in the U.S. of such elements of Sharia as blasphemy restrictions on speech, the death penalty for apostates from Islam, and the beating of disobedient women? If not, Beinart should be so kind as to clarify what action should be taken to prevent the introduction of these and other aspects of Sharia into the U.S., and clarify when opposition to Sharia is legitimate and when it shades over into being Islamophobic. But it is unlikely that he'll ever do that. Probably he would consider the request itself to be Islamophobic also, and will continue to tar Fred Fleitz and other opponents of the aspects of Sharia that contravene American law as bigoted. Fred Fleitz and the American people deserve better. I'm Robert Spencer, a Shulman Fellow for the David Horowitz Freedom Center and Director of Jihad Watch. This video has been brought to you by the Center for Security Policy.